Afternoon, everyone. My name is Courtney Middleton. I'm from Savannah, Georgia. I manage Superior Court in Chatham County there. Our session today is workforce management. This is the first session. There will be two today. This first session, we're going to explore the difference in leadership and there's something else there, human resources. So without further ado, I'll introduce you to Dana. Are you going to start first, Dana?
Rob.
Sure. Okay, Dana and Rob.
Yay. All right, well, workforce management. How many of you are HR professionals? How many of you wish you were HR professionals? Yeah. How many of you dread the fact that as a court administrator manager, you have to do this HR thing that you think HR should just do for you? Yes, all right. Notice I put in the description that this is I should have called it symbiosis, court administration and HR. You know, people flock for those kind of titles, right? Probably not. But we are going to talk today not only about workforce management in a way for HR professionals, we're really going to talk about how that is for court administrators as well. My name is Dana Bartocci, and I'm the Human Resources and Development Director. I was reading the slide to make sure I knew who I was for the state of Minnesota. I started this job March 16th, 2020. And that was a great time, HR professionals, to start being an HR professional, because I interviewed for the job and I said, I am not your traditional HR professional. I come from a training background, so you'll see a lot of jazz hands from me today. And I'm a lawyer, so I understand things, and I'm a leader. I don't know anything about contracts, FMLA, and if you want that, hire someone else. And they took a chance on me. And then the first day, they're like, how do we send everyone home? I said, I don't know. I told you I wasn't an HR person, but good thing that nobody knew what we were doing, right? The first few weeks of the pandemic, nobody knew. So fake it till you make it worked for my job at that point in time. Now, 2.5 years later, I have a better handle on how all of this works together. And I really think when we hear about happiness this morning and what's gone well in the 2.5 years I could focus on that I started March 16th, 2020, but what I choose to focus on is what an awesome time to start advocating for people of our organizations, right? Really, the changes that came in the last 2 years, I was extremely lucky to be involved thinking about the people. So my introduction, I'll turn it to Rob.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I am not the woo. I think you can tell who the woo is here. I'll be your consistency for the day. So my name is Rob Martin. I am the Senior Human Resources and Development Manager in what is known as the 4th Judicial District in Minnesota. So I serve Hennepin County, which is our largest county. Dana and I have worked together for several years ever since she came to the branch. She worked in Hennepin County as well before she became the director that knew nothing about HR. Heavy on the D, nothing on the HR. So she's right though. We have such a lucky time right now, and it's not just because of Mr. Happy that did our presentation this morning. It is because we've changed our courts so quickly. I mean, he was absolutely right when we talked about working remotely. It would have been 3 years before anybody was ready, and we had to do it in 3 days, right? So we are in a great time right now where we're now putting pieces back together instead of trying to put them together to go forward. So what we want to do today, and I'm happy to help through all of this process, is give my 21 years of experience in HR in a judicial branch back to you in the form of workforce management. So happy you're here.
So you're here for a NACM core session. Is anybody working on their NACM core certificate or working towards that? Well, actually, you all are, so because you're here, right? So we've got somebody from Iowa, and I forgot your name, who is working, and also you as well, South Dakota, from towards their core. You can, once you sign up after through the app, like was explained, work towards a certificate of the NACM core, and this is one of those. You don't have to, but hey, you already came to this one, so feel free to start working towards that. So what is NACM core? NACM core is education for today's court managers, and really today's, up-to-date, things that you wouldn't think about a couple years ago, hybrid, all of those things, keep being instilled into the NACM core curriculum, really for that excellence in administration and justice. And that's what we're all here for. Minnesota Judicial Branch's mission starts with to provide justice, right? That's why we're here. The NACM core helps all of us be better at that. And in today's day and age, it is really important. Which branch of government has the highest approval rating from citizens in the US? We've got 3 branches, right? It's us, Judicial. I will tell you though, if you've seen the news reports recently, trust in the judicial system is going down. And we know that when trust in a judicial system goes down, or other countries who do not have a judicial system that is trusted, the whole government is affected. So how does that relate to you all today? It's the NACM core, right? Having that excellence and justice is really important as administrators in our organizations to maintain access to justice, maintain equity and justice, all of those things. So by being part of the NACM core, you're really upholding democracy as we know it. I may have taken a leap right there for upholding democracy as we know it, but not so much, I think. So one of the core is workforce management. We're going to talk in 2 different sessions about different aspects of workforce management. So we have an introductory discussion. Pairs, groups, turn around, talk to whoever you want. These 6 bullet points are not just randomly selected. These are the 6 aspects of the NACM core and workforce management. So I want you to talk to your neighbor. What is the most urgent pressing need in workforce management that you see in your courts? Go ahead and chat. Online, feel free to type in your answer. All right, if you are familiar or not familiar with Kahoot, we're going to Kahoot this. So one of you in your pairs or your teams is going to go to kahoot.it. .it. You do not have to download an app. This is just a website, so it will not take up any of your memory. One of you is going to go to kahoot.it and enter that game pin. Oh, good. It's in there. Did y'all get it? Yeah, no.
Is it a nickname for the group or a nickname per person?
It's per group. So you only have to use one phone, only one of you. If you want to do 2, you are more than welcome to have more than one person. There's also the QR code up there. Got somebody that says Badgers. We can start singing On Wisconsin. Be good. All right. We're actually not going to play for points. Sorry to disappoint you all. So we will not be actually competing. But we're going to get a sense here. Oh, Margaret, thank you for putting your name in. All right, so our first question is what you just talked about. It's a practice question. From the list, what was your most urgent or pressing need in workforce management? And because I used the free version, I actually had to combine some, so just pick them. This is just a practice question. You got 30 seconds to come to your. So you are going to, on your phone, pick red, blue, yellow, or green, and you'll also be able to see these on your phone if you can't read them from the screen. You can't? You only see the triangles? Okay, so red is job analysis and classification or performance management. Blue is workforce planning, yellow is recruitment and selection, and green. Oh, good, it didn't pull. Sorry. So this is why it was our practice. This was a practice anyway, because I just wanted to see what in the room was going on. So we have our winner here, if you will, is most people are thinking about recruitment and selection, but a lot of people are thinking about employee development or relations or job analysis and classification, and workforce planning is down here. We'll talk a little bit about that actually. What surprises you? Anybody want to talk about what they talked about in their group or what they see up on the screen? Iowa.
Yeah, so I was gonna, there's not retention on there, and I don't know if that's included in the category or it could be a separate category, but workforce planning and succession planning, I feel could be higher and in some ways help the other categories as well.
Anyone else? Or have an answer to his discussion?
Does the other three areas fall under workforce planning?
Workforce planning is that, right? Like how many people are there? How are we retaining employees? So some of these definitions, you can go out to that core and find out a little bit more. Anything else surprising or not surprising about the results of what people are thinking that's important today? Oh, I see you right back there. I don't know what state you're from or city, so I can't just yell out that name, but Florida. Names are important though, so I should probably learn your name, so you can tell us your name too.
Well, I'm not surprised about the the recruitment issue because it's hard. I mean, you know, if you have an opening right now, having to find like really qualified, the applicants it's like, what do we have here? Yeah. There's nobody, either we're not paying enough or, you know, it's just not an exciting enough job. I mean, it used to be the in thing, you know, oh, you're working for the courts. Oh, no. It's like they steer so far away from that. And it's just hard to find really quality people.
Yeah.
And then, like he said, you know, retaining them. They'll get in, work for about a year or so and like, oh, not quite what I want, and they're gone.
And just when they're really productive, right? They leave. Anybody else have commentary on that? We have one right here in the green. Teal.
She's lucky if they stayed for a year. At my court, we've had people to come in and the turnover is horrible. They stay for 2 to 3 months and then they're gone.
Oh.
But they're already overly qualified for the entry-level positions that we have. And they're just in and out.
Ready to move on?
Yes.
All right.
You know what, I'm from Nevada, and what we're seeing, northern Nevada, and what we're seeing is pre-COVID, we would put out a job announcement for our entry-level clerk, and we would get over 200 applications. And it would take us 3 weeks to go through all the application, and we would really have to rack and stack them because we had well-qualified candidates. Now we put out a job announcement, we're lucky if we get 30, and they're just not qualified. We have no idea, and we're going out to private recruitment websites such as Indeed and everything. We have no idea where we can recruit these people anymore.
So recruitment is a huge challenge. That workforce planning, retention is a huge planning, employee development and engagement. HR folks, you're thinking, yeah, and they want us to fix this all, don't they? And also, HR folks have been like yelling about this problem for I don't know how many years. Hey, we have a talent gap looming. Do you know the boomers are retiring and we don't have enough? I mean, we've been talking about this and it got exacerbated by the pandemic. And so now we're in crisis mode. Good thing us HR professionals are really good in crisis mode. However,
Our entry-level jobs we're talking about has nothing to do with the boomers retiring, it's the entry-level.
the entry-level jobs,
I think with entry levels, everyone has kind of like the same qualifications, like a degree, customer service, whatnot. So when you're looking at it, then the next level of assessment would be, well, then what's your fit, right? But then sometimes you might have people that are good at interviewing. And then once they're in, you're like, oh, I'm not quite the best fit here right now. So I think that, at least for me, is one of the complications that we're having with recruitment for us.
getting people in, maybe their interview skills are really good and then they get there and it's not a right fit. How do you find that and how do you make it? Or the other, I'm repeating this because we're being broadcast too, if you don't have a mic in front of you, or it's more really the entry levels. It may or may not, boomer retiring sets off a chain reaction, but the constant churn is going on at the front line, which is not, a boomer retirement. There are so many ands to why we have this problem. It's all of these things combined that have created a concern.
I think one of the other pieces is, you're right, we used to be the competitive market. We're the courts. People want to be the courts. We had the best benefits as a government entity. Now the private market has competitive benefits, much higher salaries. I started the pandemic as well in HR from the mediation department for 25 years, and I still have yet to fill my old position because I can't compete with a salary with the qualifications and certifications. Nobody wants it. And so we aren't as competitive anymore.
Compensation is a huge issue that we're facing with recruitment and retention. And from a unified state that looks to the legislature, that's right up there on one of my issues I can't solve today. It's hard.
In my 3.5 decades, what I've seen happen is the states and county governments have all gone away from a decent pension that has, and to a whole changes. So that in the old days, you got somebody hooked. You get 10 years, and then look, if you get 20, and you could, build on that. And they weren't even looking at other jobs. They may talk about it, but they had that light at the end of the tunnel. There was a reason to stay. And since the mid-2000s, in Georgia, it was 2009, state and local governments all went to a blended or a pure 401k. So no matter what the salary is, their retirement or reason for staying is now portable or unimportant. It's not like, hey, I have a pension like my grandparents or my parents maybe used to. I'm not going to forfeit that. There is none of that. I can't keep middle level anybody anymore. I mean, since that pension system went away, we're going from, it used to, we had people 2 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, 14 years, 20 years, 25. You had steps and people moved or polled along and you brought new people in and they were in levels of experience or institutional knowledge. Now, the only people are the oldsters that are under that old system that are willing to hang on and get that, whether it's a fair or decent pension, and everybody else is the newbie and they're all looking for this is a crap pension. It's portable. It's 401. I can go to somewhere else for 50 cents more an hour. That's $1,000 more a year. And it doesn't matter whether it's a law clerk, court reporters. It doesn't matter. Every level of it, they're out the door. We're seeing judges turn over.
Yes.
They get their 10 years or whatever it is. They're back out the door to do private practice. So in the bigger picture to me is, we talk about COVID and people don't want to work or the great resignation. To me is the bigger picture is there's no longer a reason to stay at any entity anymore. You don't get vested.
So having that as an and, right? This is another thing that's piling on. We know when we survey entry-level staff that they may not be as concerned about pension, but you said middle level, right? And so this is all what we're dealing with. Today we're going to talk about something that I wish was the magic bullet that I would say, you are going to come home. How many people want, everybody wants to fix this problem. Oh, and we also want it in an easy button, right? We're going to fix this problem. But we just heard 15 different things that have exacerbated workforce planning, recruitment and retention, employee engagement. All of these things are churning. So what can we do? Unfortunately, There's no easy button, but we're gonna walk you through a process today talking about what we can do. And it's something called succession planning. And I see the look, and I'm gonna stare at the person. No, I'm just not gonna stare at her anymore. I see the person's like, seriously, I signed up for this? We're gonna walk through why having targeted conversations about knowledge, skills, and abilities for positions that, if vacant, including our frontline staff, would have a huge impact, thinking about our individuals that we already have, talking about where their gaps are, and helping fill those gaps. That's what succession planning is. It's having a conversation about what's going on. It's doing a little bit of analysis of our current state in our workforce in order to get us to our future state, which is a populated workforce in our organization that's qualified and diverse and ready to move on and go-getters, all of those things. When we say we just need to recruit better people, we just need to retain better people, we just need to, this is where that symbiosis is. HR can provide a lot of the processes and procedures and conversation guides and all of that, but you as court leaders, when we talk to employees, who do they trust the most? It's their first level supervisor. That is who they trust the most. That is who they have the relationship of staying with. Even if compensation isn't as great, but it's comparable. That is what it is. We also talked about people who are not waiting or they're ready for their next thing. Where is that? It's not in the courts, we don't have anything for them, and they're leaving. What succession planning is a word that might invoke something, but it really is just good conversations with your employees about what they're doing, how they're doing it, what their next steps are, and conversations with your colleagues about where are the gaps and how do we fill them. So we're gonna take it through a model of succession planning and walk through there. So hopefully the groans and the physical like this, when I put the side of succession planning up, hopefully by the end, you'll be able to say, hey, I wanna start some conversations with our employees about next steps, or conversations with our managers about next steps for our employees. So we've got a quiz, and now I know that you may not see all these, but we're gonna go to our next quiz on here. This is a lot easier at home. All right. In a 2021 SHRM survey, what % of HR staff say that their organization has a succession plan in place? So you can guess with your teams. The purple box or purple circle's counting down your time. All right. So I'm going to take this as 64%. In this room collectively, we think that nobody's doing this stuff, right? Like nobody's doing that HR hooey. Nobody's doing this. Turns out you might not call it succession planning, but a lot of organizations are working through a process on how to retain their staff, fill open positions, which I just heard all of you talk about. So, I'm gonna give you my woo and my jazz hands, and we're gonna convert you maybe a little to start some conversations. When you're in your last position, what prepared you for the role you're currently in? Who did you receive support and how did they support you? So go ahead and talk to a colleague about when you did that. All right, I shared my experience of starting a new job. There was not much support. Any key takeaways from the discussion that anybody would like to share? Blue shirt here.
I'm just going to share with our conversation, it sounds like it was thank you. It was a kind of a combined effort on both sides of the person receiving support, and then also now providing support to those that report up to her so that there's further succession planning as she moves on or moves around.
Right.
So
that's a great
providing
example.
support as well as receiving support and balancing that in whatever those needs look like.
Right. Excellent. It can't just be one-sided. It's got to be both. People want to invest and be invested in and do both. Excellent.
I just want to add on to that is because that's what we're discussing too. It actually is a two-way street. It has to be the not only the subordinate and manager, but what we were also discussing is, these are managers' roles that we were talking about. It took the other managers too to actually provide input to help develop that individual and growth of that individual.
Excellent. We have one up front. We had more back here.
I would say I think we saw the same thing as well, and we experienced a lot of the same thing, really talking about the succession planning part, going in, seeing the succession planning happening, and then using those same tools and moving forward and thinking, okay, if we move on, what would we see and who do we see as a positive move? And then receiving support, not just from our superiors, but from like-minded and like-level positions. So from if you're a senior manager or a middle manager, from that same level, saying, hey, we know what you've gone through moving into this role, so they're supportive in that way.
Excellent. There was someone else over here. Did you still want to chime in? No? Okay. Sorry.
Some of the times I had trouble getting support within my organization, so I actually reached out to NACM as not a shameless plug or anything, but I did. I got a mentor from the NACM program, and it happened to be Marcus Reichensmeyer, and so I hit the NACM mentor lottery with a past president, and he really helped support me and getting me into the position I am now.
Excellent, thank you. There's all sorts of ways to do it. Into this position that I'm in now, the woman who was in this position prior was my former boss. And she called me up, she said, hey, I'm leaving and I think you should apply for this job. That was about all preparation I got from her, right? So how could we have done a little bit more if this was my next step? Or what were the gaps in my learning that could have helped if this was a next goal for me? So we're gonna, understanding succession planning. Can we hold unless, okay. Thanks. Go ahead.
All right. Well, you guys have completely blown up my script because out of all the things that you've talked about, you've already nailed them all. So what I see right now, though, is that you're all in the same boat in these big themes, right? I'm gonna try to adapt here a little bit to talk about how some of you might work in really small courthouses and some of you might work in urban courthouses. So I met a gentleman this morning at the keynote where he's the only person. He is a one-person show. So how in the world do you do succession planning with one person? So I see he's not here, so that's probably why. Oh, I need the clicker. Awesome, thanks. So succession planning is the process of developing key talent to ensure the continuity of critical roles. So what we're going to talk about, as Dana said, I'm going to kind of breeze through some of these because there's three parts. There's three key parts to succession planning. And as we talked about, it really does help you take people inside the organization that are currently there, who you might see on a day-to-day basis, or somebody sees on a day-to-day basis, analyzes their gaps and knows a little bit about them. But what it also does, right, is if we're bringing in external people, it also closes those gaps of what do we need to learn from how do we need to teach them? How do we need to onboard them, right? Get them ready for our culture. So if they already have the knowledge, skills, and abilities because you've interviewed them and you brought them in, they don't know our culture. They don't know, they might have worked with elected officials before, but they haven't worked with judges, right? So that's really how this also helps when you're looking at an external framework as well. So getting into those three key components here. So we have critical roles, we have key talent, and then we have ensuring that continuity. So I was really going to go on to this with, how many times have you talked about recruitment and retention, and how many times have you talked about kind of quick, easy solutions, right? Of how do we get people in more? The gentleman that was talking about the entry level people, right? Can we get it on Indeed? Can we pay Indeed to plop it back up at the top of every job search that comes up with these keywords? Can we do that? Can we go out to affinity bars? Can we pay more, right? It's all of these different solutions, but the reality is that there is no quick fix, right? And so the gentleman who had the, take away the pension part of it, that's a huge undertaking, right? You're not getting that back tomorrow, right? That's going to take years and years and years to build that back in. So there are lots of different factors that go into that, and we're going to talk about kind of how we can close those gaps too, and different strategies that we can get into. So that first one really is the critical roles, right? And you may be thinking to yourself, Rob, every role is critical. Like, we need every single person we have. We're running lean. We have vacancies. There's no possible way that we have a non-critical role. Well, we're going to explore that a little bit more because, yes, absolutely, every role is critical. Some roles will be more critical than others, though, as we go through this. Some of those key roles can be easily filled, and granted, I take that with a grain of salt. They're more easily, you might have more candidates versus someone who's like a court administrator or a court manager, right? That one's gonna have probably a little less amount of people that might be qualified for that. So talk about that. Key talent. So really identifying who do we have in our ranks? Who is that key talent, and how do we develop that person? So we're going to get into later that planning stage and that analyzing stage of, we talk a lot about DE&I efforts in our district in Hennepin County, and a lot of those always come back to race and ethnicity, right? And so when you're talking about secession planning and you put a DE&I lens on that, a lot of people automatically think it's the people you have. It's all the internal people that are in our organization, and we're going to identify them, and we're going to grow them, and they're going to be the next wave. Well, we'll talk about this later too, but if you haven't analyzed your staff and your current staff and its level of diversity, that can be problematic. So we'll go through that. And then ensuring continuity. So that's really the last part of this, and it's the ultimate purpose of going through and really working the process for when somebody leaves, right? So you are ensuring that when it comes time for Dana's former boss to leave and getting that call of like, hey, I think you'd be great for it, and you've never thought about it, how do we ensure that continuity to kind of get people ready to be an applicant for that job? All right, so we are going to do another Kahoot. So the Kahoot is, which is the correct definition of a critical role. And I'll read these out loud here. So red is a senior leadership or executive position. Blue is a position that would cause significant impact if vacant. Yellow is a position that focuses on analytics, and green is a position that is hard to fill. And there's 5 seconds left. Fantastic. Everyone agrees. It is a position that would cause a significant impact if vacant. Does anybody want to talk about why they picked that one? Sure. Get you a microphone here.
Hi, I'm from DC Superior Court in Washington, DC, and I picked that one because one of our divisions, in the family division, just had a big turnover of people retiring and leaving. And I received an appeals that I had to process. I did my part and I sent it to the next office. Well, the branch chief there didn't know what to do with it because the person who previously had that function was gone. So succession planning would have been a wonderful thing for that.
Absolutely. It's a great example. Anyone else? Awesome. And really the answer was, it's almost really all of these, right? But that one just encompasses everything rather than saying all of these apply, right? But that's really what we're talking about there. All right, so a critical role. Let's talk about the definition of a critical role, right? So it is that position that would cause significant impact if vacant. So the myth about succession planning really is that it's only for high-level positions, right? And that it's only to fill that next promotion and that next promotion all the way up to the top. But the fact is that any of these positions can cause that significant ripple effect, right? So it's just hammering that point home that it doesn't matter which position it is, it's still going to cause an impact. If we don't have anybody who's trained as a backup to do something, it's those simple things that could have statutory limits. They could have timeframes. We might have to figure out how to do that, and that's where we're probably always crossing county lines, crossing state lines, calling NACM, trying to figure out a way to be able to find out how to do those different things. So, yeah, Dana.
Switch sides. Instead of going into pairs, I want you just to think or write down, based on the definition, what are some critical roles in your courts right now? What are the fastest moving, or back to that definition, what are those critical roles? Just take a quick second to jot down your notes so you can have that in your mind as we go through the next part. I know y'all like to talk to each other, but we'll never get out of here. And I hear the next presentation's amazing, so. All right. So this is a shout out. What are some benefits that you might see in succession planning? I just heard one. Hey, somebody might not lose a skill or knowledge transfer if we have some succession planning. What else? Anybody else? Okay, great. Oh, good. Some people are getting on board with this idea.
I'll just yell really loud. You don't have to start over. So if you're in a project, hopefully there's somebody else in that project that can keep moving it forward.
Don't have to start over. Keep moving it forward. Anything else? Don't you all worry. Oh, good.
I agree with what was just said, that you don't have to start over, but plus you get to build on it. You know, you're constantly training your people to take on new skills and abilities. And then if you do lose somebody unexpectedly, you may not be as efficient in that position, but the position can still roll forward, unlike the DC example we just heard.
Right, so there are benefits. And not only that, it's not only knowledge transfer. That's the number one thing here. But it shows employees are valued. Didn't we just say that employee engagement and development was something we were concerned about? Employee retention and development, talent attraction by saying and supporting people through internal growth. So we've got that recruitment aspect of it. Talked about knowledge sharing, and vacancies can be filled with internal talent, which sometimes is really important. Other times you have a skills gap and you're looking elsewhere, or as Rob mentioned, when you're looking at a DE&I lens, if you have a current workforce that isn't representative of your community or of the organization and where you want to go, making sure to identify that as a goal, because you can't just promote everybody internally without remaining homogenous. And it supports clear development plans and goals planning for staffing. You know, when you have to write those goals for employees, you're like, well, I don't know what it is. This is my 5th year with you. What are your goals? This really can help define some of those. So when we look at what employees are looking for, you can really see that employees are significantly more engaged when they do have that skill building and knowledge and goals of where they're going. Am I part 3 or are you part 3? Sorry.
Okay, so getting to the meat of it here. So we're going to go through these 4 steps that it takes that are best core practices for succession planning. So the first one, analyze. Second one, plan. Third, develop. Fourth, revise. We're going to dig into these, but I want to take a second to mention that there's 4 steps to this, and I know every one of you kind of looked at it or thought about it when we first walked in, right? That this takes a lot of time, right? It's going to take time to go back, look at tools, look and really get back into analyzing this, talking to a bunch of employees. But we all know that all the things that we already talked about here today also take a lot of time. How long time does it take to recruit? How long does it take to interview? How long does it take to screen those applicants? All that different stuff that goes into onboarding, that goes into offboarding, and then trying to pick up the pieces. All of that churn is what's going to burn us all out. So taking this Q2 time to plan is going to help everybody, even if you do it halfway, even if you do it something quick just to get it started and you've done it once, you can build upon it, right? But really taking that Q2 time to figure out what this is. All right, so this first one with analyze. So it's really digging in to find out all those 3 components that we talked about. What are the key critical roles? What's the talent that we have? All of those are building in and looking at it from that critical lens, right? So how can we ensure that the talent that we have can move into these jobs? So we in Minnesota have a way to look at this. So we have a tool. And it really starts at that first part of like, what do we have currently, right? So if you're looking at a person, what are their current skills? If we're looking at a position, right? What is currently happening? What do we want to happen soon, right? Is there a change that's on the way? Is there a change that we want to make? And then long term, what do we want for this division? What do we want for this position? What do we want for this person? So really having those ways to dig into it and have a way to jot it down, have a way to think about it and break it up into those different pieces. Another way to kind of look at this too is after completing that scan, right? And then looking at those critical positions. Let me see if I can get up here quick. So really looking at the position title, the name of the employee in that title, how critical is their role? Are they at attrition risk? And then names of other people in that position. Right? So if we're looking at this, do we have a low risk of an employee, so like a critical role and an attrition risk, right? Is this person a high risk flight to resign or retire, right? Are they going to be gone in a relatively short period of time? Or are we talking about a high risk employee as well that's not engaged, not going to be here very long? They might be an underperformer, they might be a high performer and they can't get any opportunities, right? So really looking at that, their critical role, what is it? And then do we have anybody else in the organization that's going to fit that? So again, just kind of working through these tools, they're not overly advanced. And then really looking at those pieces, right? So what is critical? Okay, so a vacant would cause a limited impact, right? Versus it would cause an impact and it would cause significant impact, right? So yes, absolutely. If we're talking about the churn of our entry-level positions, it's going to cause an impact, right? If you have 5 entry-level positions, one of them may cause limited impact if it went. If 3 of them went, then they might all be significant impact, right? So this is also where you can kind of see, is the person an attrition risk, right? So if you got all 5 of your people in a high risk area, then that all becomes crucial on the position side and the role side as well, right? Another thing that we all talked about here is that right in here, we're not competitive in that compensation market anymore, right? And we are also in the same set of skill demand as a lot of employers are. So now all of a sudden we're down in here without having to do anything, right? So we're at high risk already just from being in the public sector, just from being in the judicial branch of, having employees that have high demand skills out there already and can be paid more for it. So we're already looking at a big risk in that portion.
All right, I'm going to hit the next slide. So here's an example, and some people are uncomfortable writing people's names down. You don't have to use a tool like this. We had a conversation. Anybody have cybersecurity teams? How in demand are they? How much can we pay them? All of these things. So we kept losing cyber folks. So we sat down with our IT director and said, name your cyber folks. How many years of experience do they have? What is the going market rate for them? Where do we have, instances of any conversations? Where can we grow their skills? What can we do? We had a good targeted conversation, and we have an internship program. And we talked about the interns and what we can do for succession planning for the interns. So it doesn't have to be, if you're into spreadsheets, great. It can just be a conversation about who's in the division and where are we at. It is not a pick your favorites conversation. It's not any of those things. It is a truly legitimate business reason to be discussing an employee and the factors that keep them there or make them at risk at leaving. This is not something that we do often, so sometimes it feels a little uncomfortable, but it really, truly, if you think about that cybersecurity example, you can think, yes, if you have a group that's hemorrhaging people, we need to talk about who's in that group and what they do and how can we diversify what they do.
Awesome. Thanks, Dana. All right. So then we're going to go into plan. And so what we're going to do here too, again, we're going back to that what's happening now, right? What do we want to see happen? And what do we want to see happen in that long term? So who, in your opinion, would be able to successfully carry out those duties? What is their readiness? Do they have the current KSAs that we're looking at? Where are those gaps, right? So again, kind of looking at this tool, trying not to make it overcomplicated. So we've got a position that's going to be open, right? So I know you can't probably read this. Polly Martin, she's the potential person. What is her readiness, right? She is ready in 1 to 2 years. Okay, so what's the gap analysis? Have we done a gap analysis on her? What are the skills? What are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that she needs to be ready in 1 to 2 years? Okay, we've done that analysis. Now the development plan. It's in progress. We've identified what it is, and now we've worked with her, and we've got that plan in place. Now you come over here, employee number 2, Sue Vang. Sue Vang is ready right now, right? So if somebody were to leave today, Sue's ready, right? Did we do a gap analysis? We didn't do one. Should we do one? We could do one, because then we could also put out a development plan. Talking to employees, you're always going to find, and I'm sure all of you know this, you're going to find things that you don't already know, right? That you're assuming just because they're ready now that they don't need any skills, right? What if this was a first-time supervisor, for example? They might be ready for that role. Do they have every ability to lead people? Are they only a systems expert? Are they an SME? Do they, getting those kind of things, asking those questions is where you're going to find that gap analysis. So just another way to look at it and a simple tool to kind of address that and identify it. All right, so things to watch out for when planning. You're beginning, you're remembering that you are actually filling a position, right? And you're not replacing a person. And I think that's always the first thing that is that first point of bias when you talk about succession planning. You're looking at, just think about if Sue Vang that was up there, that you asked one manager, right? Who had over layers of a division, was in a county, you asked one person, who do you think would be great at filling your position when you retire? And they gave you one name without any history behind it. Just, nope, I think Sue is gonna be the best person to fill that role, right? If you don't go through some of these gap analysis part and you put all your eggs in that basket, you could be missing out, right? Sue could be an absolute subject matter expert and have no ability to lead people, right? Sue could absolutely lead people in the wrong direction, right? You don't know if she's aligned. There are pieces of this that you absolutely want to make sure that you're doing and that they have the knowledge, skills, and abilities, right? So just keep that part in mind, that you are always filling that position, right? You're not replacing that person. It's not the same. You don't need the same exact thing that was there right now. Everybody's going to bring a new component to it. Everybody's going to bring their own spin to it. But as long as they're aligned with the values and they have that knowledge, skills, and abilities, that's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck there. All right, and then things to watch out for here when you're planning. So protected status is also things to stay away from. So, race and ethnicity, sex, gender, disability, pregnancy, veteran status, all those things, absolutely things that to stay away from in this. Because when we get to these examples of what we can't consider, these are all the things that you don't really want to be able to do here, right? So I don't think she would want this position. I've heard she's trying for another baby, right?
I heard that one literally out of a judge's mouth once, just so you know.
I heard the same thing. It does happen. But even, I don't think she'd want this promotion. You take the second half of it off, how would you know? You're assuming, right? That's why we get into these things. I'm not sure how the team would react to having a supervisor that's younger than them, right? He recently went on a deployment and will probably go on another one. So I don't want to plan for his absence, right? Almost the same thing that goes in with a baby. They don't have their own driver's license. And what if they have to go to another site, right? Do we know that they're not interested in having a driver's license? Do we think that they're not interested, or can you use public transportation? Can you use Uber and Lyft? Are there other ways that you can get to a site that would be the same thing? Or if a driver's license is needed, then it goes in the minimum requirements, right? So the team is made up of all guys, and a woman just wouldn't want to lead them. Boo. They would need accommodations, and I don't want to have to deal with that, right? They're not fun to deal with at times, but we all have to deal with them, and people can do the jobs with accommodations. He's going to be retiring in 2 years anyway, so I would like to give him a promotion to someone that will actually be around longer, right? So these are all biases that someone would have that aren't relevant to the job. They're relevant to a person, right? They're relevant to a bias. So those are definitely things you want to stay away from. Just skip it?
Just raise hand.
Oh, raise hands. Okay. Sorry, microphone's on. It's hot. It's hot.
I'm the time monitor here, so I'm...
All right. So an employee is identified in the succession planning process is guaranteed the position. How many of you would say true? Raise your hand. Nobody? Okay. How many of you would say false? Excellent, right? That is not the purpose of the succession planning, is to identify that next person, groom them, and give them the job. So that is definitely the myth, and the employee who is identified is not guaranteed the position because, again, you want them to have the right knowledge, skills, and abilities. A gentleman that was up here talked about the fit, right? That goes into that they're aligned with the mission, vision, and values of your court, and you want to make sure that that's what you have, right? The person that's going to be the most successful at the role. All right. So when a position becomes vacant, then all applicants must be considered. That's what we just talked about. Succession planning builds the applicant pool and doesn't define it. And so that's a big key that we are talking about as well of, how do you measure that, that DE&I kind of effect within your current courthouse? So one of the things that, that we do here too is that we looked at, does our employee base match the demographics of Hennepin County? And we found that the answer was yes. It almost matches identically to Hennepin County. But then if you disaggregate it a little bit further, or you look at it with another lens of, what about our court customers? What about the people that come into our courthouse, right? What's their demographic, right? And we found that we can't collect race data on every case type that we do in Hennepin County or in Minnesota, but the ones that we did and that we can collect on, we don't match. We don't match the race of the people who are coming into court. And so what does that tell us? That, if those people don't feel that they live in a county that looks like them and feels like them, well, then when they come to court, they're not going to expect that it's going to look and feel like them, right? And so for them to have more trust and confidence in our system and in our process, we need to do better, and we need to look more like our customer base, right? It's not only look at it, it needs to be more welcoming. It needs to have that more belonging in that aspect. So those are the kind of different ways we can look at that as well. And then understanding readiness here. So we talked about, like, in the event of somebody, the woman in DC, right? Like, you talked about somebody that goes out and doesn't know how to do, the next process or the next level in an appeals and the next level of something, and a supervisor would go out. What does that look like? So really identifying those places where somebody could step in to that the very next day, right? Could they be ready to hit the ground and be successful and learn at the same time? Or do they truly need 1 to 2 years? Maybe they need 3 to 5 years of things. When you start doing this analysis, then you can start putting groups of things together. So what I mean by that is, if you're looking at gaps in 30 or 40 people, and they all have, the majority of them have the same theme, right? They need, maybe they need, more listening skills, right? Maybe they need something that is all the same. Then maybe you design a course, right? That goes out to everybody, or goes out to these groups of individuals that are it's going to impact the many, right? And it can also have the independent mentoring programs. It can have the external programs that you're at. We talked a lot about IT, right? HR, accounting, those types of professions. They need more specialized training, right? That we might not be able to provide. What does that look like? All right, so another tool, just to kind of give you a look and feel of it, of the gap analysis. So it's really looking at that current employee. What is their current knowledge, skills, and abilities? What would they need to be successful? And then what are those gaps? So it just shows you a little bit of the format that you could use, or what it would look like. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to how to develop.
All right, so you just ask those questions. There's a tool. It's a piece of paper with a couple words on it, a couple questions. Hey, what are they doing now? What would you like them to do in the future? What do you need to get them there? So then you got to develop the employee, which we know leads directly to employee engagement, satisfaction, retention, all of these things. Doing the work ahead of time, now creating that engagement plan. So in pairs, talk about the ways you are currently developing employees for new opportunities. Is there anything you're doing right now? So just it'll be a brief moment. What are you doing currently in your courts? And we'll share that, as you are all the experts. Developing employees. It's something every court probably does, but maybe not in a strategic way when we talk about succession planning. You probably have employee training programs, maybe you have a mentoring program, maybe you have all of these things already, but how do you put them into this? And if you don't have these programs already, well, why not? But they take time, money, we're already short people, Dana, we've talked about this. Thinking about how we get into develop. Develop does not have to be all about large-scale training. For those of us who are trainers, I know Margaret's one of them, there's a problem in a court. Hey, we need more training on that. I've said that. I've been on the other side of that, right? Like, oh, we should just do a training. The truth of the matter of how we develop people is 70% of the development of an individual is on-the-job training, doing new tasks. The guy this morning, the happiness speaker, he talked about building those neurons, repetitive processes, all of that. So attending one training doesn't get those synapses firing, doing the work. And that is 70%. About another 20% when we develop employees is mentoring, it's relationships, it's talking to others about the work. The last 10%, formal training, reading, classroom training. And as a classroom trainer, I wish it was bigger than that and I had a bigger impact, but I don't. The reality is only 10% is there. So when we're looking at developing our employees, we need to be looking at all three of those things. The first being, hey, how are they going to learn by doing? Another tool, but it's basically 3 questions. When I'm looking at this employee, I've analyzed the gaps. Give a quick example of our intern this summer in HRD. She really wanted to give a presentation. So we assigned her one. She's had to work through all the things, and that's that 70%. We also gave her an employee mentor who's really good at presentations. They've talked a couple times. And we had her sign up for a Skillsoft on doing the presentation the best way possible. Which one took the most time? Actually writing and delivering that presentation. And so as we look at training and development, we cannot rely only on the leadership development courses or the Skillsoft courses. We have to rely on the doing. What are those knowledge, skills, and abilities that you as managers, hey, they have not given presentations, and the next step up gives presentations to managers. How do I get them involved in that? When I worked at a law firm, we had a list of all the different kind of cases and all the activities, whether it was depositions or deposing an expert. We had a list of all of those things, and we made sure, and we checked the boxes. This person hasn't deposed an expert yet, and they're in their 4th year as an associate. We better get them that experience. We'll have them partner with someone, and we'll have them attend a CLE on it. But we made sure we knew what they needed to do to get to the next level, and then implemented that. But it really is just learn from doing, learning from others, and formal training. So when you identify those. 4th step is revise. Keep working at it. How is it going? How are we looking at this succession planning if we're thinking 2 years out? How are we developing those goals in that area? So I'm going to go through these 4 quickly in very short phrases. Analyze. What's going on with your positions? Which ones are turning over faster? Which ones are critical? Thinking about that. Plan. Who's out there? Where are their gaps? What are some of the skills that they might need to take it to the next level? Develop. Okay, let's get them some doing and some listening and some mentoring on that skill, and then see how it's working. So although we laid it out with spreadsheets and charts and all this stuff, succession planning are conversations that some of us are having right now, maybe all 4 steps, maybe 1, maybe none. And it really is a process that can help us retain our employees, because engaged employees who are being developed stay in organizations, can help lower our recruitment when we retain, also be a benefit for recruitment when we show that we have a process to help our employees get ready for the next level, and can help with workforce planning. All of the things that we talked about and that you said and are in the NACM core, you don't have to use the word succession planning. You don't have to use all the tools we laid out. But if you think of it as having a conversation about what's going on in my workforce today, who are the people that can help with that, and where do we need to help them, and help them get there, that's what we're talking about. And it really can help with recruitment, retention, engagement, all of the things that we talked about. Is there anyone who's still thinking, no way? No, I don't want to actually hit, I don't want you to raise your hand on that. I want you to think about this. We've got 1 minute left. In your head, that position that you had maybe thought about 20 minutes ago. Think about how you would start the conversations around succession planning for that type of position. If you truly want to make it happen, write it down. If you truly, truly want to make it happen, talk to your neighbor. That's what research shows. Hopefully you've got a position in mind, and you'll start the conversations that lead to retaining our workforce. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, we'll be here.